Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I talked about part 2 of the 7 things families do who make informed decisions, have peace of mind, are in control, have power, and have influence, whilst their loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to share with you part 3 of the 7 things families do who make informed decisions, have peace of mind, are in control, have power, and have influence, whilst their loved one is critically ill in intensive care. So welcome to another blog at IntensiveCareHotline.com, and once again, congratulations on taking action in getting informed and taking control. Just by doing that, you stand out from the rest of families in intensive care, and it will give you an edge when dealing with the challenges, difficulties, and complexities in intensive care. Our blog, as well as the Your Questions Answered series, will help you find your voice, will help you make informed decisions, get peace of mind, take control, have power, and influence decision making in the jungle of complexities surrounding intensive care, and it will more importantly help you to be in control, feel powerful, and influence decision making. So in the previous episodes, I covered the first 2 points of the 7 things families do who make informed decisions, have peace of mind, are in control, have power, and have influence, whilst their loved one is critically ill in intensive care. The first point was families of critically ill patients in intensive care are facing reality and accept reality as it is. And number 2, families of critically ill patients in intensive care are sticking together no matter what, and they're not intimidated by the intensive care team. So today I want to focus on the next point, number 3, which is families of critically ill patients in intensive care are taking personal responsibility for the outcomes they want, need, and deserve for their critically ill loved one. It's another one of those important distinctions between the 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care who don't get what they want, and between the very few families, and in fact less than 1%, who actually do make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence. As I have briefly mentioned in some of my other blogs, not being intimidated and not letting the perceived power and the perceived authority of the intensive care team dictate the dynamics and events is crucial for your level of making informed decisions, getting peace of mind, control, power, and influence. Part of that feeling is that they perceive the nurses and the doctors in intensive care as people with perceived power and with perceived authority. Think again. It's only perceived power and authority. It's not even real. Therefore, you don't need to feel intimidated by it. You can let go of that perception now. Most families of critically ill patients in intensive care are intimidated, fearful, overwhelmed, and frustrated. They feel that they are outside of their comfort zone, and they feel that they have no or very little control, power, and influence in the things that are happening around them. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care who make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence are not concerned with the intensive care team's agenda. Instead, they take personal responsibility for the outcomes for their critically ill loved one. In fact, they have decided to control and master their critically ill loved one's fate and destiny. Most families of critically ill patients in intensive care think that because they don't know much or they don't know enough about intensive care or medicine in general, that they need to quote unquote suck up to the health professionals in intensive care. Because of that misguided and distorted thinking, and because of that misguided and distorted perception, a lot of families consciously or unconsciously are handing out and giving away their power on a platter. The very few families of critically ill patients in intensive care who make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence are the ones who are not intimidated and who don't suck up to the doctors and nurses in intensive care. Usually, those families have one thing in common. They are all very good at taking personal responsibility for the outcomes that they want. And it doesn't matter what your background is. Families come from all walks of life. It doesn't matter what your background or other families' background or their level of education is. Families who have control, power, and influence in intensive care simply don't suck up to people. Period. And they take personal responsibility for the outcomes that they want. And you and your family need to stop sucking up to the doctors and to the nurses now. You might be doing it consciously or unconsciously. A lot of people do it consciously and they think it will bring them bargaining power in their situation. Well, I can tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. As I have said many times before, if you suck up to the doctors and to the nurses in intensive care, and if you put them on a pedestal because you think you can gain influence, you are on the wrong path. Just because health professionals in intensive care happen to be doctors and nurses working there doesn't make them superhuman or doesn't make them smarter than other people. Think about it. Despite being health professionals in intensive care, they are also regular people outside of their work environment with their own personal lives and their own personal issues. So, from now on, simply stop sucking up to the intensive care team. Stop putting them on a pedestal and start treating them as equals and start taking personal responsibility for the outcomes that you want, need, and deserve for your critically ill loved one. Yes, and I repeat it once again, you have heard me saying that correctly. Stop sucking up to them, stop putting them on a pedestal, and start treating them and start taking personal responsibility for the outcomes that you want, need, and deserve. Start taking personal responsibility for your critically ill loved one's fate and destiny now. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care who make informed decisions, who have peace of mind, have control, have power, and have influence in the situation, they do this consciously. And the fact of the matter is that they do it regardless of why they're doing it, and it generally works very well for them. My best clients that take up my one-on-one counseling and consulting and advocacy service are the ones who have already made a conscious decisions that they will not take no for an answer from the intensive care team for the things that they want for their critically ill loved one. They also realize that intensive care is a very volatile, very dynamic, and also highly political environment, and they realize and understand that intensive care teams only tell them half of the truth and half of the story that they actually need to know. Therefore, those families start to do their own research and they get professional help here with us at intensivecarehotline.com. Once you start to realize that the things are happening behind the scenes in intensive care are very powerful, you also realize that becoming a master of your critically ill loved one's fate and destiny is not optional. So, and if you've come so far, you may want to think about using my one-on-one email or phone counseling and consulting service. And you can find the options for that on the top of the website. Let's move on. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care who make informed decisions, who have peace of mind, control, power, and influence are the masters of managing their relationships within this difficult, challenging, volatile, and unique situation and environment, even though to begin with they don't have the perceived power or perceived status of a doctor or a nurse. And you can do it too. You just need to make the conscious decision that this is what you're going to do. And I can tell you from experience that the minute you and your family feel intimidated by the perceived power and the perceived status or authority of a doctor or a nurse in intensive care, you will be doomed because you are giving away all of your power, influence, control, and status. Not only are you putting you, your family, and your critically ill loved one in a difficult and challenging situation, if you do that, you're also diminishing your own level of making informed decisions, getting peace of mind, control, power, and influence. You would be starting off on the wrong foot altogether, and you are almost putting yourself, your family, and even your critically ill loved one in a corner from the very start that you will have difficulties to get out of. By sucking up to doctors and nurses in intensive care and by putting them on a pedestal, you are adding on another layer of issues that you and your family need to deal with, and you don't need that. The alternative is much easier, and it also is a lot better because you'll get results. Just make sure that you have high expectations from the very start, and make sure that you expect and accept only the best for your critically ill loved one and for your family. Again, see yourself and your family as equals in this situation. And that is what you are after all. After all, it is your loved one who is critically ill in intensive care and not the doctors and the nurses' loved one. Do not and do never copy the behavior of the families around you, because those 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care who are intimidated by the intensive care team, if you copy their behavior, you will be doomed. I cannot tell you how many families inquiries we get here at intensivecarehotline.com where their family member died in intensive care, and only after that, and when it's too late, they do their research and then they find our website and they read our case studies, they watch the videos, and then they realize that help would have been at hand. Instead, they believed everything the intensive care team was telling them, only to find that the intensive care team had a hidden agenda and in essence might have killed their loved one. And you might say, but Patrick, how can I treat them as equals and as my friends? I don't think I'm as smart, as influential, and as powerful as a doctor or a nurse in intensive care is. Well, I can tell you that's the wrong path and it's the wrong thinking altogether, so turn back. Your most important asset in this situation is your thinking, your determination, and your perception about the situation. Your thinking, the determination, and your perception of the situation has a lot of influence into the outcome of the situation. And it's most often the only thing you can actually control. Therefore, make sure you take personal responsibility of the outcomes that you want, need, and deserve for your critically ill loved one, and don't let anything interfere with that determination. Take charge of your critically ill loved one's fate and destiny. It will make all the difference if you don't feel intimidated by the intensive care team and if you don't suck up to them. Make sure you get professional help doing it, and make sure you get my one-on-one counseling, consulting, and advocacy service, because I can help you very, very quickly to get the results that you want, need, and deserve. Not taking personal responsibility, not doing your own research, and not taking charge of the situation would be futile, and it won't serve your critically ill loved one and your family, period. I can't stress this enough. 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care do not make informed decisions. They do not have peace of mind, control, power, or influence. Therefore, you once again need to behave very, very different from the start. And you need to become difficult and demanding instead. What do I mean by that? I wrote an article and made a video about that. The 5 reasons why you need to be difficult and demanding when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. And you can check that out by clicking on the link below this video in the written version of this blog. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just click on the link below this video. That'll get you to all of our other free resources. Now, you need to show this with every ounce of your behavior that you are determined to get the outcomes for your critically ill loved one that you want, need, and deserve. Show it in your communication, in your body language, and in your unwavering belief that you are in control of the situation and the outcomes, and not the intensive care team. How do you do that? Well, I'm really glad you've asked. Again, I have created some other resources for that. For example, go and have a look at how to stay positive if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Or have a look at why your body language may be your biggest obstacle to peace of mind, control, power, and influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Once again, the best clients that I normally work with are the ones who take personal responsibility for the outcomes they're going to get for their critically ill loved one. They then start doing their own research and they seek professional support through my one-on-one counseling, consulting, and advocacy service. The bottom line is this: the more personal responsibility you and your family take, the more you and your family understand that you are the master of your critically ill loved one's fate and destiny, the better the outcomes you will get, period. Expect anything less, and the intensive care team will notice and sell you short without you realizing that it's happening. The next point is that families of critically ill patients in intensive care know what they want for their critically ill loved one. And it's tying right in with what we've just discussed, because it's another big point, and another point that clearly separates the families of critically ill patients in intensive care who make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence from the families who don't have that. And once again, knowing what you and your family want for your critically ill loved one doesn't come down to knowing the specifics about intensive care or about medicine. It comes down to common sense and to your and your family's uniqueness. Of course, you want the best treatment and the best outcomes for your critically ill loved one in intensive care. You and your family want everything to be done for your loved one so that they can fully recover. You and your family have no doubt and no questions in your mind how the best possible outcome can be achieved after you have been informed by the intensive care team and after you have done your own independent research here at intensivecarehotline.com. And of course, you and your family are also bracing yourself for setbacks, because you and your family know by now that intensive care can be an unpredictable and volatile environment. You also know and understand the importance of unity within your family during these times of crisis, despite issues and despite difficult family dynamics. You and your family know and understand that steering the course towards a good outcome and a good recovery for your critically ill loved one in intensive care is dependent on your family's cohesiveness and your family's ability to speak with one voice and not have family dynamics run the show. And given that you have come thus far, you also know that the best sometimes means cutting your losses and accept the reality that you and your family and your critically ill loved one are dealing with. Let's say you have come to the point that you and your family know that your loved one is not going to fully recover, and that your loved one might end up with a limited quality of life in the future. You also know that if this is the case, that you and your family need to brace yourself for the future steps that you need to take in order to deal effectively with this new situation. You may already know what steps you need to take. If you don't know what steps to take as yet, you probably have to start thinking about it, and you probably have the things in mind what you and your family think is best for your critically ill loved one. Keep that vision alive and keep holding on to that vision. Staying positive is half of the battle. You also know that you, your family, and your critically ill loved one can deal with setbacks this situation is throwing at you, and you also know that such is life, and what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. Knowing what you and your family want for your critically ill loved one in intensive care sometimes also means that you and your family need to be able to let go. You need to be able to let go when you feel like things are not going as planned and when you feel like things are getting out of hand. I also know that this is easier said than done, especially when the gravity of the situation demands that you and your family confront the possible loss of your loved one. And as I have said before, coming clear with the situation and accepting reality as it is very challenging, and it's usually the only way to move forward. But before you even contemplate that your loved one may die, you need to find out if there are no other options. Again, have a look at some other resources that I created. For example, have a look at the difference between real and perceived end-of-life situations when your loved one is in intensive care critically ill. And another resource that I created is a meaningful recovery possible when your critically ill loved one is on the brink of dying in intensive care? Again, have a look at those resources. I put some links below the video. Once you and your family have accepted that your critically ill loved one in intensive care is not going to survive potentially or not going to fully recover, you can then once again take further steps to accept the critical situation or an end-of-life situation and also focus on the things you can and want to control in either situation. It's very important that you have input in any situation so that you and your family have peace of mind in such difficult, tragic, and challenging circumstances. And once again, always remember, you and your family know your loved one best and nobody else. And if you and your family know what you want for your critically ill loved one in any situation, including a potential end-of-life situation, and you are clear and specific about what you want, you will make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence, and you are not dependent on the intensive care team's decision. You and your family know that your critically ill loved one's best, and you also know your family best. How would you and your family and your critically ill loved one like this critical situation or an end-of-life situation to look like? You've got to ask those questions. What are your cultural, religious, spiritual, or your individual needs? How much time do you have? Do you only have a few hours? Do you have a few days? Do you have weeks or even months? Is there a possibility for your critically ill loved one to go home for a service with a service like intensive care at home, for example? Once again, the minute you and your family know what you want, that's the minute when you start controlling your destiny in whatever specific or particular situation you are in. Never be afraid to take a stand and make your views known. Never think that just because you are dealing with intensive care health professionals who have been involved in many critical situations, including many end-of-life situations, that they actually know what's best for your critically ill loved one. The people who know best are you and your family, because you know your loved one inside out. and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. So make sure you have peace of mind. To give you some specifics, you may want to think about addressing your critically ill loved one's individual, cultural, religious, or spiritual needs during an end-of-life situation. For example, are there any people that you would like to come and see your critically ill loved one before they're passing away? Think about it. The clearer you and your family are, the more control, power, and influence you have. And more importantly, you will feel like you have done the best you could, and you will make informed decisions, and you will have peace of mind. This is so important because if you don't take charge, if you don't take control, and if you don't know what you want, those situations might leave a very bitter taste for you and for your family, and you might feel remorseful. So look out for part 4 of 7 things families do who make informed decisions, have peace of mind, are in control, have power, and have influence once their loved one is critically ill in intensive care. It'll be there for you next week. So, how can you become the best advocate for your critically ill loved one? How can you make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence quickly whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? Well, you get to that all-important feeling of making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, real power, and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast once your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. Discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle, and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 mind-blowing tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to making informed decisions, getting peace of mind, control, power, and influence in your situation. You will get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your critically ill loved one's situation. Next, how to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You will also get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I will see you again next week in another update. Make sure you also have a look at our Your Questions Answered section where I answer your questions, or simply send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. Or you can call me, find international phone numbers on the top of the website. Also, have a look at our ebook section where you get more ebooks, videos and audio recordings, and where you can also get one-on-one counseling and consulting with me via Skype, over the phone, and via email by clicking on the Counseling and Consulting tabs on the top of the website. This is Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.